Welcome to GuideMia. Today we're going to talk about the Cympha Studio Operations Reference, the full documentation that ships with Studio itself, and how to find your way around it. This one is for everyone who uses Studio at studio.cympha.com, clinicians reviewing cases, designers cleaning meshes and staging tooth movements, lab managers verifying deliverables, anyone planning implants or tracing a CEF. Studio is a big product, and the how-to guides on cympha.com deliberately don't document every button and panel. That job belongs to 2 reference volumes hosted inside Studio. By the end of this lecture you'll know what those 2 volumes are, how to open them, what each chapter covers across the 7 workspaces, and, most usefully, which chapter to jump to for the task in front of you. Think of this as the map of the library. Listen now, and you'll find any answer faster later. Let's start with the division of labor, because it explains where to look for what. The how-to guides on cympha.com cover end-to-end workflows, submitting a case, sharing a plan with a patient, approving or rejecting a design. What they deliberately don't try to do is document every Studio button, panel, and shortcut that would run to hundreds of pages and go stale between releases. That job belongs to the detailed operational reference, which is hosted inside Studio itself and ships with every release, so the version you're reading always matches the version you're running. The practical promise of today's lecture is modest and useful. About 2 minutes to find the right chapter for any task, and the chapters themselves are written to be read in 5 to 15 minutes each. Map first, chapters later. The reference splits into 2 volumes, and they're 2 views of the same surface area. The first is GuideMia Cympha User Guide, Operations, the reference manual proper, every workspace, every panel, every menu item, in the order they appear. The second is GuideMia Cympha Use Cases and Training, the same material reframed as worked examples. I have an Ortho Plus plan and want to adjust the staging, I have a CBCT and want to plan implants, and so on. Same facts, opposite entrances, one indexed by the interface, one indexed by your task. Both volumes are published in English. The Studio interface itself is a different story. It ships in 6 languages, English, German, Spanish, French, Italian, and simplified Chinese, switched from the language toggle in the hamburger menu. So an Italian-speaking designer works an Italian interface and reads an English reference. Opening them takes 1 click each. In Studio's hamburger menu, User Guide opens the operations reference for the current workspace, and Use Cases opens the worked examples volume. One behavior to know so it never confuses you: these menu items hide when the current workspace doesn't need them. Workspaces filter the hamburger menu, that's their whole job. So if you're in a narrow workspace and don't see the user guide entry, nothing is broken. And there's always the back door. The published HTML pages have stable URLs, and those always work regardless of what workspace you're in. The written how-to-doc links every chapter anchor directly. So, menu when it's offered, URL when it's not. Now let's walk what's actually inside, volume by volume. The backbone of the whole reference is the workspaces chapter, because Studio is organized around 7 of them: 3D processing, orthodontics, ortho monitoring, implant, facial scan, CEF image processing, and digital smile design. The chapter covers what each is for, which menu items each exposes, and how automatic workspace switching works when you open a deep link URL. And it states the single most clarifying fact about Studio's design: a workspace is a menu filter, not a mode switch. Switching narrows the hamburger menu without changing your scene. Nothing loads, nothing unloads. The one exception is ortho monitoring, which also rearranges the layout. The case bar gains camera, cloud save, and orientation cycle controls, and a playback panel mounts beside the 3-dimensional view. Around the workspaces chapter sit the orientation chapters, conventions and layout, what the dock, the case bar, and the workspace NAV actually refer to, the application menu item by item, the top toolbar and model browser, and the keyboard shortcuts and toast reference. Next come the chapters about the scene itself, the data you load and how you handle it. The Meshes chapter covers the mesh formats Studio reads, STL, PLY, OBJ, how the viewer interacts with rotate, pan, zoom, and pick, the right-click context menu on a mesh cleanup operations, and the register to flow for aligning 2 meshes, jaw to jaw, scan to CBCT, and so on. The CBCT chapter covers loading DICOM, the rendering panel in the left dock, how slice interaction works, scroll, window, and level, pan, and the CT-only orthographic toolbar that appears when the active view is a slice. And the articulation chapter covers lateral excursion, starting the simulation from a loaded case or from 2 jaw meshes, the occlusal plane, and the clearance and collision graph. If you've watched the earlier lectures in this series, these 3 chapters are the written deep ends of exactly those topics. For designers, the densest cluster of chapters documents the case bar, the bottom bar on any OrthoPlus or AlignerBot case. The Case Controls chapter covers the step slider, the previous, play, and next transport, the movement chart icon, the IPR icon, and the case XML actions, export and import. That last pair matters beyond Studio. The XML actions are how AlignerBot rejections round-trip a structured artifact back to the lab, so if you're in that pipeline, this chapter is required reading. Then 3 chapters go deeper: the movement staging chart, the per tooth grid, when it appears, and its single-click, double-click, keyboard, and drag-and-drop behaviors, plus the hint actions for one-click protocol changes, the IPR overlay, enabling it, what the visual elements mean, and editing the clearance values, and the tooth movement panel, the per tooth readout of mesial distal, buccolingual, and the rest, at the current step. Now the specialist workspaces, starting with implants, and there are 2 chapters, not 1. The dental implant planning chapter covers the implant catalog, the add implant workflow, updating an implant you've already placed, the implant plan file that carries the whole plan, and the selected implant section that shows the current implant's parameters so you can check what you're editing before you edit it. The second chapter is interoperability with the desktop Guide Mia implant planner, opening one of its project files in Studio, which implant tools are actually available while that project is open, not all of them are, the design log that travels inside the file, and saving back to the same project so the round trip is clean. Then ortho monitoring, which gets a chapter befitting its exceptional status, because it's the one workspace that rearranges the layout rather than just filtering the menu. The case bar gains camera, cloud save, and orientation cycle controls, and a playback panel mounts beside the 3-dimensional view. The chapter covers capturing patient photos through the live camera preview with the model overlaid, the 5 orientations, front, left, right, upper, and lower, how Studio proposes the phase number from the treatment start date and the days per step, and phase playback, including why a missing phase honestly says no photo for that phase yet instead of quietly substituting an earlier photo. Here's a taste of the level these chapters operate at. The cephalometric tracing chapter doesn't just say Studio can trace a lateral X-ray, it walks the dialogue phase by phase, opening the X-ray, the initial landmark prediction, the manual correction pass where you fix what the prediction got wrong, then the analysis, and how to save the tracing. That phase-by-phase structure is typical of the whole reference. Each chapter mirrors the order you'd actually encounter things on screen, which is what makes them readable in 5 to 15 minutes. And it's also why the use cases volume exists as a separate entrance. Sometimes you don't want the anatomy of a module, you want someone to walk the task with you. Before we get there, 3 chapters remain on the user guide side. 3 chapters close out the user guide. Digital Smile Design covers the DSD workspace, the 5-step wizard with photo, detect, frame, refine, generate, the per tooth detection and its report card, the golden proportion tools in the frame step, the 2 texture modes, template AI crowns or preserving the patient's own texture, and the before and after compare slider. It also states 2 things worth carrying with you. The processing runs on the device, with only model weights fetched, and DSD is a communication and case acceptance tool, not a lab fabrication input. Next, the OrthoPlus case review chapter, opening an OrthoPlus case, navigating between views, downloading the case, sharing it, dropping it into the media gallery, and the combined view that shows the CBCT alongside the case. And finally the housekeeping chapter that quietly gets used more than any other, media gallery, screen capture, and Cympha project pictures, what appears in the gallery, how to take a screen capture, how to remove a project picture you didn't mean to keep, and how a Cympha project bundles the pictures along with the scene, so a saved project reopens with its imagery intact. Now the second volume, the same surface area, indexed by task, in numbered worked examples. Let's walk them in order, because the numbering itself is a curriculum. 1. Why Guide Mia Cympha exists, and how to use this training, orientation for first-time users, and the doc is explicit that you read this one once. 2. The Cympha layout and mouse basics, a guided tour for someone who has never opened Studio before. Then the ortho spine. 3. The OrthoPlus treatment plan viewer, opening a plan and walking through it step by step at chairside. 4. Tooth setup and staging adjustment, described as the day-to-day designer task, tweaking the staging grid until it matches the protocol. 5. XML input and output, synchronizing with Guide Mia OrthoPlus, exporting a tooth position file from Studio and re-importing one from the desktop planner, and this is the file format AlignerBot rejections right on. 6. Three-dimensional mesh viewing and processing, or fixing, opening a scan, cleaning it up, closing holes, and saving the cleaned mesh back out. And 6b. Lateral excursion, the articulation simulation, for checking working side and non-working side contacts at chair side. The back half of the volume. 7. The CBCT viewer and virtual patient creation, loading a CBCT, reviewing the slices, and building the virtual patient by registering optical scans to the volume. 7.2 breaks landmark registration out on its own, with its own number, and the reason is stated plainly. It's the trickiest single operation in Studio, so it gets its own walkthrough rather than being buried inside a longer chapter. 8. Implant planning and synchronizing with the Cloud Implant module, planning implants in the browser and round-tripping through the implant plan file. 8a. Interoperability with the desktop Guide Mia implant planner through its project file, and the doc tells you exactly when to reach for it, when your implant lab works on desktop and you're collaborating from Studio. 8b. Cephalometric tracing on a lateral X-ray, start to finish. And 9. The quick reference, where to find things. That's the cheat sheet, and the advice attached to it is the most practical line in either volume. When you can't remember which menu a thing is in, look there first. Let's close with the decision tree, because this is the part to actually remember, and I'll take it in two halves. If you're new to Studio, start with use cases 1 and 2, and the doc is emphatic about the other half of that advice. Do not try to read the user guide front to back. It's a reference, not a novel. If you're cleaning up a mesh, closing holes, removing artifacts before submission, go to the User Guide Meshes chapter and use Case 6. If you're a designer staging an Ortho Plus or AlignerBot case, you want 3 things: the Movement Staging Chart chapter, the IPR Overlay chapter, and use Case 4, Tooth Setup and Staging Adjustment. And if you're rejecting an AlignerBot design and need to export an XML, there's exactly one destination: use Case 5, XML Input and Output. That's the ortho and mesh half of the tree. And the second half of the tree. Planning an implant, the dental implant planning chapter in the user guide, plus the round-trip documentation. Reach for the desktop interoperability material specifically if you work between desktop and cloud. Tracing a Ceph, the cephalometric tracing chapter, plus use Case 8b for the worked example. Running a smile simulation from a photo, the digital smile design chapter. Monitoring a patient's treatment progress with photos, the ortho monitoring chapter. And one last branch, which comes with the best piece of advice in the whole document. If you're reviewing an Ortho Plus plan at chairside with the patient watching, read use Case 3, the Ortho Plus treatment plan viewer, and practice the play and step controls before you do it live. Nobody wants to be learning a transport control with a patient in the chair. That's the map: 9 questions, 9 chapters, about 2 minutes to the right one, every time. This tour, with live links to every chapter anchor, is written up at cympha.com. Open Docs and find the Cympha Studio Operations reference. From there, one click reaches any chapter we discussed today. And if you'd rather be walked through the workflows themselves, that's exactly what this lecture series is: every Cympha workflow, one lecture at a time, so subscribe for the rest. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.